Sometimes you can perform so well and not get the result. Sometimes you're an inch away from winning 1-0 and an inch away from you losing the game 1-0.
This is McClaren Performance.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the McClaren Performance Podcast, the podcast where I talk to my dad about everything football, performance, psychology, and together we try and provide something useful for those of you listening. Now today we've got a good topic to get into, which is the idea of teams getting a new manager bounce, which is a short-term improvement in results as a new manager comes in. And we're going to take a deep dive into that. Just before we get into that though, just want to wish Dad a happy birthday. It is actually his birthday today as we record, so happy birthday, Dad.
Oh, thank you, Josh. I thought we celebrated that yesterday, the whole family around. It was great to see everybody, and today's been a quieter day today, but as usual, don't know what my age is, and your mother keeps saying I wish she'd grow up. So 21, that's how I feel, and 21 is that's what I am.
Yeah, if you say so.
In the mind.
You got a nice card from me anyway, so happy for you.
It's the smallest card that I've got.
It's the best.
I've only got five, but it's the smallest one.
I said straight from Tesco. It's the best I could do. I don't know what's wrong with that.
No chocolates with it. Can't believe it.
The other thing I wanted to talk about though was on Sunday going to Newcastle and with the women's team. I was working with the women's team and we were at St James's Park and had the women's game supported by the owners with, I think the number being 22,134 fans, which is, I think, the highest within the whole women's pyramid in every league, the highest amount of attendance this season. That's including all the big dogs up in the WSL as well. So, I mean, just unbelievable being there. And I was doing I was watching the warm-up like I usually do, being on the pitch and doing that part of things, but doing that with a crowd is so strange.
And they weren't booing you.
I know. I go across like that.
Booing you.
I'm Joshua Harrison when I'm there, and Joshua McClaren.
Change your name, yeah. It's a good job you look like your mother.
But no, it was good, and it's really interesting to see how that women's game is changing. And it was interesting because the pricing of it is, so it's £3 for adults and kids going free, under 18s going free. And if that's something that continues, then it's the demographics of people that will go to those games, which you don't usually have. You know, it was a men's game for men's, boys fans and things like that. But that game on that day, it was lots of families, lots of young kids, lots of girls as well. And so I think it's really interesting for the future if that continues, that it's a real new demographic that are coming in to watch football and being inspired by it as well, which I think is going to make for a better future. It's going to make it for a better women's game. This is the fourth division getting 22,000. There's other clubs with other fans back in their clubs as well. So hopefully it's something that can continue, something that's going to be absolutely massive. But for us, it was a great occasion.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, Josh. And it reminds me of a few weeks ago when at the new camp, 91,000.
Yeah.
And that was a record for a women's games. It's incredible. But what I've seen, especially working with FIFA the last 2 years on the project that we're analysing every country and trying to find the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, SWOT analysis on each country. And one of the opportunities for every country is women's football. The scope for improvement is so huge. And one of the things that we noticed within every country, well, especially the top countries, every kind of, and Newcastle are doing it now, every club in the top division should have a women's team associated with them.
Yeah.
And that's the message that we are sending out to all the countries within FIFA. If you want to develop the women's game, then your top clubs should be running a women's team parallel with the men's team.
Yeah.
getting the same facilities, the same kind of staffing, and the same opportunities. And with that, and as you've seen at Newcastle, as we've seen around the world at the new Camp 91,000, it can be huge. It can be a spectacle where people can enjoy a different type of football, but a football that I have seen develop over the last 4 or 5 years, that over the next 4 or 5 years will absolutely take off.
Yeah. I mentioned it in the last bonus episode I did with like you said, with the WSL, the big top 6 Premier League clubs almost all have a club that replicates them in the women's league. And if they don't, they're really funding those teams to go up. Liverpool are going up from the Championship this season. The Wolves are going up, trying to get into the Championship, which they are. They'll be in the Championship next season. And it's just like it's a complete shift. It's a complete shift kind of economically, and it's a complete shift in the media as well. It's just this change in football, which is just absolutely massive. But from that, we'll go into our actual topic of today, which, like I said, was the manager bounce, the new manager bounce. We always see it, and we're seeing it more regularly now with lots of clubs, lots of teams always shifting and changing managers, and kind of seeing, I think how you define it for me is that new manager bounce is within the first 5 games, really. You see a change in the players, you see a change in the performances, and ultimately you see a change in the results. And we're going to kind of dig into that today with this season and try and figure out exactly why that is. So I've got all the lists. I've done my stats as usual, done all the work today, got all the stats for all the teams in the Premier League, seeing what exactly is going on. I think the most interesting team, and the one I'll start off with, is Watford, because they're almost like manager bounce FC, really. I've got the stats here in terms of they've had 18 different managers since 2008. So that is 18 different managers over 14 seasons. That's not including 2 managers who have come and then returned later on as well. And also using a caretaker manager, I think at least twice in 2 different times. So on average, a manager doesn't last a full season at Watford. And this season particularly has been a tricky one for them, having 3 different managers. The first manager who got them up from the Championship is Cisco Munoz. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because I don't actually know Watford that well. I don't remember the manager they had when they came up. But in his last, I've done it by measuring it by the amount of points they've got from 5 league games. So for him, his last 5 games, he got 4 points out of 15 games. Then with Ranieri coming in, he then got 6 points out of 15. So that's a slight increase in that. And then obviously Ranieri didn't last very long. He ultimately had 5 last games. And in those 5 last games, he then got 1 point out of a possible 15. And then with Roy Hodgson coming in, that's 4 points out of 15 after that. So a small kind of increase for them in results with those changes, but not really anything significant and not really any great difference. It's something we'll get into. But I think in terms of Watford, when you have the quality of players that you have, sometimes a change in management isn't really going to be making that big a difference, especially with Ranieri. Maybe that's not the right appointment for them. Maybe more so Roy Hodgson is, but even then, not really any change. What's your perspective on that situation with Watford and how they keep swapping and changing all the time?
I mean, it's amazing that they kind of, I don't know behind the scenes how much evaluation and analysis is actually done on the team, but generally you go on quality. And if you've got quality and that quality is not producing, but it has quality, either it's produced before, individually, collectively, whatever, then I think you can make a change. But if you've not got that quality, especially that quality to go and score goals, then you have to look at the quality and can it. And generally teams are leaking goals when they're getting beat. And generally managers tend to say, well, okay, the first thing that I will organise is the defence and making sure that we don't concede. So, okay, We might not score or score one again, but we might keep a clean sheet that will get us a draw, get us a win. So that's always been my philosophy with any football team. Is I always look and say, how do we win games? Do we score a lot of goals? But do we concede a lot of goals? So are we a 4-3 team? Are we a 1-0 team? Are we a 2-1 team? Because we will score every game. So we will get a draw, or we will win 2-1 or lose 2-1. So you generally know from your goals for and your goals against what you're going to be, and you must adapt to that. And so when you look at teams when you go in, and especially Watford, you look at the quality of the players. And generally, if you've got the quality, but it's not producing, you can make a turnaround pretty quick. But it looks like they've not got the quality and expecting a turnaround. I suppose if you can't go on quality and you can't improve that, then you have to improve attitude. And that's in attitude in individuals and attitude in team. And you can do that. And I suppose that is the mindset of the people in charge and making the decisions is, one, have we got the quality? Two, have we got the personnel? And three, have we got the attitude? And so when you look, you go, well, is the quality, system, personnel? So they're the only three things that I say you can change. And I say that at halftime, especially if you're losing. You've got to change attitude, you've got to change personnel, you've got to change shape. And I suppose that's the same going into a football club. Can you make the quality of a player better, improve his performance? Can you change system? So we're leaking goals, we're playing 4, so do we play 5 so we keep a clean sheet? And can we change personnel? So is there somebody of quality that is out of the team that has been for some reason fallen out with the manager, and say he's the goal scorer?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you come in and go, I can see the quality of that player. I can turn him around, get him back on side, and all of a sudden change his attitude to want to play in the team and an opportunity to play in the team, and then he will score. So I think in the case of Watford, they've just not had the quality. Nobody's gone in there and actually changed the results, either in goals against, and Ranier is a classic defensive coach, hit them on the break. And that's how Watford were very good in the Championship. I saw them a lot last season. And even then he goes and Roy Hodgson comes in, who's the master of clean sheets. Yet he still can't get that. So I don't necessarily look at the attitude of the team, especially at Watford. I look at the quality. So I think the evaluation of why they keep changing and has to be a lot deeper.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about performance, and we talk a lot about the randomness of performance. So sometimes you can perform so well, and not get the result. Sometimes you can perform so well, and get the result. Sometimes you're an inch away from winning 1-0 and an inch away from you losing the game 1-0. You're a referee's decision from a goal being allowed to being disallowed to a sending off to other things. VAR has tried to clear that up. I agree, but the randomness of football, that you can actually go on a run and unbelievably still performing well and, not winning 7 games. And that can continue. So the randomness of football can sometimes fool the naked eye and the owners and everybody to say, we're still hitting the key performance indicators, the KPIs. So your team should have KPIs. So shots on goal, shots against, how quickly you win the ball back, little things, how compact the team is. So a measurement of performance. If a team has a measurement of performance, then you can say, well, that performance is down. And I always say, we get a level of performance, we'll win 8, we'll draw 1, lose 1, if we're a top team and we've got that quality. If we're below that quality, then it might be a little bit different. But I always go on that scenario, and the performance is the key. And I take Brentford as a perfect example. When I was at QPR and we played Brentford, they'd lost, and it was the manager's, Thomas's, he'd just come into the job. He'd gone 9 games. I think he'd lost every one. I'm not too sure. And we were the 10th game. And I saw the game. I always remember it was a fantastic game. We happened to win 3-2, but it was end to end. They were a good team. They got shots goal. But we were a little bit fortunate on that day. When I look back, and I thought, that's his 10th game. He's bound to go. But they kept, and I always remember the reason was because the performances in the end the team will start winning because of the KPIs and the performance of the team. And the rest is history. He took them from the Championship and he's keeping them in the Premier League. So the randomness of football can be deceiving, especially to the media and especially to the owners, because football is a game of passion. And I've had it quite a few times where that passion is spilled over and the rationale goes out of the window and you've lost your job. And you're probably 1 game away from turning it around, winning and going forward. But the key is you must have the quality of player to produce results. If you don't have the quality, you are always going to be in trouble. Yeah. No matter what manager you change.
Yeah. There's a few things there. You're right. I think the measurement of that short term, because the good manager bouncing, it's really a measurement of 5 to 10 games. And that's too short a measurement really to judge a manager's impact on what's going on. But also, like you said, a manager coming in is really limited, always limited by the players that they actually have. And there's only so much you can do within that, because we're looking through these manager bounces really throughout this season. When you look at teams like Everton and Norwich, there's no real, in the change of manager, there's no real short-term change at all. So with Everton, it's like Benitez, his last 5 games, he got 4 points out of 15. And then when Frank Lampard comes in, his first 5 games, 3 points out of 15. So no real change at all. Same with Norwich. Farke was in there, 5 points out of 15. And then Dean Smith comes in, same again, 5 points out of 15. And that's a really good, same with Watford, Everton and Norwich. They're all teams really where you'd say, right, they're really limited in the players that they have for whatever reason. So the structural change or the change in leadership that happens isn't really going to make that difference at all. The interesting one is most recently with Burnley, with Sean Dyche leaving. Funnily enough, that's not even enough to measure 5 games. Mike Jackson, the new manager, has only been in for 3 games. So with Sean Dyche, his last 5 games, he got 3 points. His last 3 games as well, he got 3 points. And then with this Mike Jackson interim manager coming in, they've got 7 points out of 9. I think they're undefeated in their last 3 games. And that's really interesting because most people would look at a team like Burnley and say that, you know, in terms of the ability of the players, that's what Sean Dyche should be known for, the ability of the players that Burnley have. And his ability to keep them in the league is what made him such a good manager. And you'd think in losing him that's all over, but it almost seems that they've benefited from him going in this short term. But again, I think it's that short-term measurement that doesn't really reflect the truth. I think the long term of Burnley, Sean Dyche as your manager, he could have gone down with Dyche. It's probably better for the long term because he'd keep you going, he might get you back up. He's still a fantastic manager. But it's quite interesting still, even in the short term, that they've got such good results. I wonder if we could reflect maybe on why that is exactly. I think it's quite interesting. Yeah,
I listened to, it wasn't on the TV, and I listened to the pundits on Soccer Saturday talking about the game. And I think, we were driving to the Leeds Man City game, and they were talking about, and at the time they were saying, Watford have gone 1-0 up. They've started really well. And after half an hour, I can't remember who was commentating on the game, they said, Watford should be out of sight by now. They should be 4-0 up. They should be 5-0 up. And it's an unbelievable. They've missed chances. They've done this. They've done that. And I just thought, God, I've had so many of them games where you come in at half, we should be 4 down.
Yeah.
And then you come in at some games and you go, we are 4 down. It's the randomness of the situation. And you're absolutely right about just coming in for 3 games. You can't judge a manager on 3 games. He might get that look, which unbelievably everybody says you need, and you do. And especially in football, when it's such a low-scoring game, it's not like basketball where there's 200 points per game, and you miss a 3-pointer, you hit the rim, it stays out. That it can make a lot of difference. It can't. Whereas in football, because of the randomness of football, at half an inch here, half an inch there, a referee's decision, sending off whatever, can have a huge impact on the game. And so you have to be, and that's why you have to take the emotion out of it and look at the performance. And they're probably performing the same and a little bit more relaxed because the quality's not changed. But and maybe they're freed up, and maybe they got a little bit of confidence out of the first game. But maybe it's just that Sean Dyche was unlucky in his last 5 games. And that would eventually keep the performances going, turn around.
Yeah.
It is again the quality. I remember, going to Derby, same division. I looked at them. They're quality players, played good football. Unfortunately, they were 15th to 16th, but Nigel Clough had assembled a good team, good squad. But maybe that randomness, maybe that unluckiness that he was going through a bad run. Fortunately for me and unfortunately for him, they decided to make the change and they brought me in. I was delighted, Josh, because I went, they were good. They're good players. Maybe it's the system. Maybe it was nothing to do with attitude or anything, or maybe it's leave it, whatever. I got the opportunity, and I remember going in and I sat in the stand the first game. I just joined in the afternoon, played Ipswich, and they played a diamond shape 4-4-2. And with a diamond shape, you can, when it works, you can win 4 or 5-0. When it doesn't work, you can lose 4 or 5-0. And on this night, it wasn't working. And they were 4-1 down at half time. Simo said, you better go down and make some changes. I said, I don't really want to, but he said, you'll have to, otherwise it's not going to be a good start. So I went down and changed the formation, changed to a 4-3-3, which I always wanted. I think introduced John Eustace just to sit in front of the back four, protect because there was no protection, and just go 4-3-3. And we had two wingers and Chrissy Martin down the middle. Because anyway, second half, it turned it around and we ended up 4-4. And the team, all of a sudden, their attitude changed. But I think the quality was there. It was just a change of shape, a change of formation, which suited the players, more consistently. And then we had a benchmark to work on. So, and I've moved into some clubs where they've not had that quality, and no matter, I haven't got a goal scorer. At Derby, I had Chrissy Martin who scored 20 goals a season. So I thought, I've got a goal scorer. He's not scoring at the moment. All I got to do is turn that around, get him scoring. Or, I've got a defender who's injured and he's been injured for 10 games. The poor manager's not had him. He's got no results. He's been sacked. The player's near to fitness. You've got the benefit of. So it's also the timing of you going in, of the bounce that you can get.
Yeah.
And it's generally quality players. It's generally injuries to the top players, or it's falling out with the manager. And I quite agree. Managers can lose dressing rooms, can lose that respect, can lose the players, so that, yes, they appear to be not running for him. They appear just to be on a downward spiral. That can happen. And I've had every situation like that. But the key is, if you've got quality players in that squad, all you've got to do is turn that around somehow and know the opportunity that you've been given. And that, on top of that, is doing your homework, know the situation, know what you're going into, know that a goal scorer is injured, is going to come back in 2 weeks, not 2 months, because in 2 months you could not score, can't shore it up, and you could be losing your job. So you've got to know the exact situation of that football club and what it takes. And then when you go in and given the opportunity, you have to adapt very, very quickly to the situation. You know it, adapt to it, and then deliver from day one and turn it around.
So is that what's happened with Mike Jackson at Burnley then? Because really he's inherited the structure from Sean Dyche, who set up a really good club, a long-lasting, long-term winning, long-term staying in the Premier League. He's inherited that team that really in that minute 5 or 10 games, analysing that, haven't been doing too well for, like you said, that randomness. And then Mike Jackson's really come in and inherited that and utilised that. I think there's one aspect of it, the kind of psychology of it is that when you're losing, the narrative around it, the media, from the players, the manager is kind of like that we talked about before, that focal point where the manager is kind of the identity of the team, and then they become associated with losing. And as soon as that manager comes out, that association of losing goes. But what stays, in a sense, for Burnley is that structure that Sean Dyche already had there and how he set up the team. Mike Jackson's come in, who has seen that, understands what Sean Dyche has done, has come in and just taken that place, and within this short term has utilised that and got these results out of it. And with that, a fresh face, the players see a fresh face, there's a new narrative within that short term. Anything, it's like that honeymoon period, we call it, isn't it? Anything can happen. They put whatever impression they want on the manager, and from there they progress and build forward. And that's kind of where I think a lot of that manager bounce comes from. But specifically with Burnley, I think that's what happened as well.
I think you have to be smart as a manager. I think you have to really read the situation. One advantage Jackson has going into Burnley is that he's there. He knows the situation exactly. You get many bits of advice when you go in to a new club. All you got to do is change this. All you got to do is change that. All you got to do is do this. All you got to do is do that. When you're in it, you know it. So he probably roughly had an idea. And as I said, all the way along, and this is, the manager's power, or really tools that he's got to change anything, to change a situation when you go into a football club, to change from game to game. You've lost one game, going into another, to change during a game, say at half time. There are only three things you can change. You can change personnel, you can change shape, formation, and you can change attitude. Or sometimes you have to change all three. So when you go into a football club, when you lose a game, you're looking at the next game and you're 3 games, you're in trouble. You've lost 3 games on the bounce. What can you change? You can only change 3 things: personnel, shape, attitude. And personnel might be someone who's been left in the wilderness. You can bring in somebody who might be injured. All of a sudden he's fit. He comes back in. Shape, like I did, change from a diamond to a 4-3-3. And attitude, you know, they weren't running. They weren't playing right. Just going completely different. Put your arm around them. You know the situation. Know each player. How to change the best players or the players that influence. So he might be getting criticised week in, week out. All you got to do, come on in. You're going to be the man. You're going to be the player. You're going to be the one that turns this around for us. Great responsibility. Leadership. We talked about that a lot. The dressing room is just so important. And if a manager's lost the dressing room, you go in with a fresh face. Don't lose it on the first day. Do something that you galvanize the dressing room. So personnel, shape, attitude are the only 3 things you can do. And behind the scenes, whatever he's done, he's changed 1, 2, or 3 of them. And he's actually garnered and gathered momentum at the present moment. So much so that win against Watford, they must be absolutely flying now.
I think that reflects a lot in other clubs as well, exactly what you talked about, where they've seen that manager bounce more so than other clubs. So say with Leeds, Bielsa was there, and that was quite an old system with him. He got 1 point out of his last 5 games. And then this new manager with a real new, fresh approach, kind of publicly saying as well that he felt that the players were working too hard under Bielsa and he was overworking them. He's come in with a new, and I heard a story somewhere that he came in, gave a speech to the players, his first speech, and the players giving an applause straight after. He's come in with, like you said, he's come in straight away and earned that respect. He's got 7 points out of the last 15, which is a sharp contrast to what Bielsa had before. Same with Man United. When Ollie was there, the last 5 games, he had 3 points out of 15. And then Rangnick comes in really with a new philosophy, a new way of playing as well. Different type of person. He's come in that short term and had a big improvement instead of 10 points out of 15. And then with Spurs as well, when Nuno started, obviously there were problems there. He had 6 points out of his 15 games in his last 5 games, 6 points out of 15 points, that is. And then Antonio Conte comes in, and that's 11 points out of 15. New winning manager, changes things, and things happen from there. So I think in those clubs where you've got the players, you've got the ability to make those changes, like you said, I think it is really like you change those 3 things, and that is where you see that short-term inspiration, that short-term burst. But only when you have the quality of players, only when you have those options, and you can actually, it's possible for you as a manager to make those changes. Because in clubs like Norwich and so on, you're very much limited with the budget. You're very much limited with the players that you already have there.
I think the key thing is we're talking about short-termism. And you're absolutely right. You can go in and what you demonstrated there and the examples that you gave were of, say, an example with Bielsa, who I don't know, but apparently hearsay, allegedly, didn't really speak to the players, didn't really communicate with them. All you got to do is just go in and be the opposite.
Yeah.
So I just come in, all of a sudden, get together, boom, communicated with them all. Love you all. Gonna do this, gonna do that. We're gonna blah blah blah. Oh, round up! What a breath of fresh air! Boom, instant bounce. And you do have to change. And the examples like Conte, Tottenham and Nuno. I'm not saying Nuno was what, but all of a sudden, Conte has just gone in and probably is the total opposite.
Yeah.
Of Nuno, total opposite.
Yeah.
And the players, and maybe one manager that absolutely loves and adores the players, and the next one comes in and is horrible. It's just a change of attitude in that dressing room, inside each player that you have to get. But the key to maintaining that is that you have to consistently do it every day.
Yeah.
And that is the difficult bit.
Yeah.
That is the difficult part. And that's why it's not easy, but you can get a bounce. But how do you maintain that? By doing it every day, consistently. Because if you don't, then players will go for, we're back to the same old, or standards are dropping from what they were at the beginning. So if you come in and the standards have been slacked, and all of a sudden you go, right, standards are this, these are the rules, going to do this. And then after 6 weeks, when you've been getting the results and everyone's flying away and players get complacent, that's when you need the consistency of the message, consistency of the rules, consistency of standards every day. So I'm not saying it's an easy one to get a bounce, because I have gone into situations and got a bounce. And I've also gone into situations where it hasn't been a bounce, where it's been a great situation, where I did in Holland. They finished second in the league to Ajax. The previous year I went in, to Ajax, I think it was. They came second. I could have gone in there and I didn't need to change personnel. I didn't need to change shape. I didn't need to change attitude. I didn't need to change anything. I just had to keep out of the way and make sure that consistency. So I sat and watched and what little thing could I bring? And I brought the mentality of, well, we must win. We must win. And to win, so it was win, win, win at all costs. It wasn't about possession. So each situation is different, but the key to maintaining that over weeks, months, years, if you want longevity as a manager, is whatever you go in with, you've got to be so consistent to keep winning.
It's funny you say that, just because with Villa as well, one I forgot to mention, with Dean Smith being there beforehand. Out of the 5 games, his last 5 games, he got 0 points. But then you talk about a change, a contrast in character, Steven Gerrard. And again, like you said, someone who's played the game before at such a high level, one of the best, what that gives to a player is, Steven Gerrard's coming in. And then with that, that's 9 points out of a possible 15 in the next 5 games after that with Steven Gerrard. And then what you touched on there was the longevity after that, whereby Steven Gerrard has picked up a system in Dean Smith, a team that's done well coming out of the Championship and is surviving well in the Premier League. Bad run of results, but Steven Gerrard's coming and taking advantage of that, and now he's got a good bounce out of them. And his test now is to be his own manager, keep that respect all the time throughout that in that next few seasons or so, and build on what's already been, or he will suffer the same fate of bad run, see you later, and next manager takes advantage of that.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a big test. And I said it, I think we talked about it last week with Frank Lampard. Sometimes you don't have that experience. Why is Sam Allardyce so good at that situation over the years? Yeah, he understands it. He knows it. And he reads the situation, reads it quickly, goes in well prepared, knows what he has to do, brings in a staff that complement him, and cover his not weaknesses, but cover things that he might have to be the tough disciplinarian. Therefore, he can't give the old arm around the shoulder love to certain people. He needs somebody else to do that. He gets the right people around him. He knows the situation. He knows the formula. How does he know the formula? Because of his experience. Yeah. He's been through it. So he's learned. And what We talked about Wayne Rooney at Derby, what he's experienced and going down. They're learning and they're learning quickly, and Frank is exactly the same at Everton, and this Jackson at Burnley. If they want longevity, they've got to get through this. They've got to learn from it and be consistent in their managerial career.
I think the summary is this new manager bounce does exist. It does happen more often than not in the right circumstances of having the available players and being able to make changes. But the real long-term success is nowhere near determined by those first 5 games and seeing that bounce. It's determined by the longevity. A manager's success and their ability to manage really should be judged on 1, 2, 3 seasons, really, not these specific games necessarily within it. Exactly that.
We'd have bad runs and bad games and bad this and bad that, but I remember during that period being so consistent in our messages, so consistent in our structures, so consistent that the players, remembered that. We kept reminding them of that, and we kept saying, we lost a couple, or it said, doesn't matter. We keep performing. We keep hitting the KPIs, the performance measurements that we say is a good performance and will get as a result. We keep doing that. It will turn around and will do. So consistency in your message, your behaviour, your body language. That's why a manager's job is so tough. It's great. Can be great in the short term, but to create longevity, consistency, you need.
Well, thanks for another good chat, Dad. I think a really good conversation again there about manager bounce and what exactly that is and how it works and how we can actually utilize it. I think from Dad's point of view there, in terms of a manager coming in for their first 5 games or whatever, that short-term things you can change. You can change the personnel, you can change the shape or the formation of the team, and you can change the attitude of the players as well. And some managers really utilize that in certain situations to come in and make that difference. From a kind of psychological point of view, why I think that short-term bounce kind of happens, I think for one, players really want to make a first impression to new managers that are coming in. They have an opportunity to get into the starting 11, or they're in the starting 11 and they may not be in it because of the new manager. So there's a real individual drive to want to perform better than they were before. I think second to that is something I touched on already, is that the manager is the identity of the team, and the old manager kind of becomes associated with losing in that short amount of time. Say the past 5 games, they've lost those 5 games, they're associated with losing. And as soon as you take that manager out, that negativity also leaves as well. And then what you have is a new manager coming in, a new idea, a new person. And it's almost like this honeymoon period where anything can happen, and you have this hope in this manager, in the first 5 games, and then the reality really kicks in. But then lastly as well, I think it's that the environments, and it ties to it, the environments are heavily determined by their leaders, and that determines how kind of psychologically safe a player feels. And what I mean by that is how comfortable they feel to play, to be instinctive. And then sometimes when a leader comes out, it's a sudden change in environment. An environment changes people so much. And for some players, I think it really benefits them when they're not listening to the same person. And then someone comes in, puts their arm around them, tells them how amazing they are, tells them they can do anything, makes them feel safe, says they'll be playing. And it can bring a real change into that player, into that team as a whole. So yeah, they're my kind of 3 things, and really our best attempt at figuring out exactly what the new manager bounce really is. And I think we've done okay there. But yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
This is McClaren Performance.